Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Deanne. At this time, I'd like to reconvene the regular board meeting. Clerk of the board, please call roll.
Paul?
Yes.
Solis?
Present.
Pike? Mr. Pike, you're muted.
Here.
Segura?
Here.
Tarantino?
Here.
Day?
Here.
Adamos?
Here.
Thank you. We'll now hold a moment of silence and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I guess, but if we could keep with 9/11 just being last Friday, we keep the thoughts and of all those who periled in that horrific event on 9/11, all the civilians and all the first responders who passed there and since. So we'll do a moment of silence in observance of that. Thank you. Place your hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Liberty and justice for all.
and justice for all. Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. The board met in closed session preceding this meeting to discuss the following issues: public employee discipline, dismissal, release, reclassification, reassignment, resignation, transfer, Government Code Section 54957. 2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, paragraph 2 of subdivision D of Government Code Section 54956.9. 3, conference with labor negotiator, Government Code Section 54957.6. The board took the following action. In closed session on August 31st, 2020, which was the last meeting, it was moved by Hall and seconded by Segura to ratify the actions providing notice of termination of the employment agreement with the superintendent pursuant to Section 17B(I) of the employment agreement, with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino no. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for the September 14, 2020 regular board meeting. Do I have a motion?
Solis, so moved.
I'll second.
Moved in second. Any discussion on that? Vote, please.
Adamos?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. We'll now provide an opportunity for the San Diego County Office of Ed Representative Dr. Mark Scavarna to make any comment.
No comment, except I'd like to thank you for your comments about 9/11. It's interesting after watching that again with those aircraft going into that building of just what kind of memories that brings back to people. And I really appreciate you saying something about it. I think a lot of people are tending to forget about it, and it's just a terrible event. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll now have an update from our acting superintendent, Dr. Moises Aguirre.
Thank you, President Segura. Buenas tardes, everybody. For this superintendent report, I'm going to focus on the following 3 items. 1, a Zoom platform update. 2, distance learning update. And 3, assessments and targeted supports for students who have disabilities or who are having trouble accessing distance learning. First, Zoom. Many of you have raised questions and concerns regarding limiting digital platforms to Google. Through collaboration, we agreed to add Zoom to our platforms. Today is the first day of the Zoom pilot occurring at multiple sites. We thank those individuals who are participating in this pilot so that we can bring this platform as an option to all campuses by the end of the month. Second, distance learning. Our reopening plan indicates the following. On September 21st, 2020, a determination will be made if the district continues in distance learning after the fall break. Given the metrics included in the approved reopening plan, it is likely that the district will remain in distance learning for the remainder of the semester, subject to change based on local health indicators. The metrics in the plan are the following: 14-day rolling average of San Diego County positive test rate below 5%, and a 14-day rolling average of new coronavirus cases in Sweetwater School District zip codes decreasing over 14 days. Neither of these conditions has been met across the district. We will continue to monitor and make an announcement on September 21st. We will be discussing this with our association partners and our stakeholders over the course of this week prior to an announcement. The next step in this plan occurs on November 30th. At that time, a determination will be made if the district continues in distance learning to the second semester, or potentially bringing back up to 10% of students based on academic and social indicators. Thirdly, considerations are ongoing regarding beginning in-person assessments and targeted supports for students who have disabilities and students who are having trouble accessing distance learning. Our approved plan indicates that school sites may be available to provide distance learning supports on site for students who may not have a home environment conducive to participate in online learning or are not able to access learning due to a disability or displacement. In conclusion, these are difficult times that we are all living through, with a pandemic, brush fires, social and political upheaval. However, we call on everybody to continue to advocate and communicate in a civil manner as we model behavior that we ask our students to follow. We appreciate and acknowledge the difficulties our entire community is having adjusting to these difficult times. Please know, our staff are working incredibly hard in these challenging times to meet students' needs, and we thank them for all their work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Getty, for that update. We will now have a report from our Student Board Representative, Desiree Adamos.
Good afternoon. I just kind of want to go over what we discussed at the middle school ASB council meetings and the high school ASB council meetings. We did discuss the plans for reopening, and we kind of vocalized our opinions on that. And the students are saying as well that they feel like it's not safe enough yet to return to distance learning. So thank you for vocalizing that. And a lot of our student representatives that are working towards pushing towards ethnic studies at their school sites are very excited to hear more about the G5 item on the agenda. And we have a lot of students here that are on the YouTube live stream that are here to listen to that. And in addition to technical support for students who do not have the home environment for distance learning, we did discuss at the high school ASB meetings that there is some confusion that was brought up with online meeting requirements. For example, some students are confused whether or not they are required to turn on their cameras. So if you can you please clarify for these students if it's a requirement or not?
Thank you. Let's move to D2, public communication of non-agenda item. This is the point on the agenda where members of the public may address the board on any matter not on the agenda and have 3 minutes each to do so. The Board of Trustees cannot legally take action on or respond to the matters not posted on the public agenda, but will refer the matter to the superintendent's office for review and report. The speaker's comments shall refrain from using profanity and shall be presented in a respectful manner. Thank you for your cooperation.
Yes, the first comments I have are from Ashley Dahlstrom. Board members, first I had a narrative about COVID concerns, but then I grew with questions. On October 12th, partial return at the beginning of flu season would disrupt the very consistency and routine we're working so diligently to create in our online classrooms. Why not dedicate semester 1 to online success before interrupting the growth of our online programming? Why are my classes filled to capacity with 40 students when my physical classroom is only capable of holding 36 while not in a pandemic? Considering the plan's proposal for allowing percentages of students on campus at a time, this is unfathomable. It's as if we have been preparing for the worst in the first place. Sweetwater has experienced tumultuous years of media scrutiny, and we cannot afford to squander school reopening in haste. There are students and families grieving lost loved ones to COVID, loss of income, loss of home, stability, normalcy, and life as we know it. A return to school followed by another shutdown won't help the grieving process. Did you know diabetics who contract COVID-19, even diabetics who control their disease, are at high risk of developing diabetic ketoacidosis? Catching COVID isn't my fear. My horrifying nightmare of anxiety revolves around complications I have no control over. Diabetic ketoacidosis isn't something I want to experience because of frivolous argument among politicians. Sweetwater, are you truly ready to deal with the emotional fallout of opening schools? We're already a mess. Why not pause for a bit longer to save face and prepare for a safe opening that isn't in 4 weeks? The next comments are from the Dixon family. Would the district publish the results of the 2 recent surveys to families and staff teachers? We are confident that the results will reflect that most families and staff wish to be given a choice to return to in-person instruction. We would also like to encourage the district to open facilities for student use. Other districts are allowing the use of their facilities for clubs and other extracurricular activities, and we would like to encourage Sweetwater to do the same. The next comments are from Jennifer Marquez. I'm a special ed teacher at Sweetwater High, and I would like to comment on the current status of being a special ed teacher in our district. For the past 7 years, I have been a special education teacher in our district, and without a doubt, this year has been the hardest. With our need to move into distance learning, we have been given more and more tasks to handle, all while also living through a pandemic and not being able to see our students. If a student is not attending classes, we are told to connect with them. If a student is failing a class, we are told to help them. If a student is having mental issues, we are told to reach out again. If anything is going on with a student on our caseload, we are the ones that everyone goes to for help. But if any of these situations were going on with a general education student, they would have an attendance person to help them log on. They would have a counselor to help them figure out what's going on with grades and or mental health. But when a student is in the SPED department, we are in charge of every aspect of their lives when we also teach 5 to 6 classes a day in addition to our caseload. I can't stop my classes to help one of my students log into their online class. Their teacher should be the one that reaches out to them and helps them log into their class. If there is an issue with attendance, the attendance person should reach out. We cannot continue to be their end all for everything. I would like for the role of a SPED teacher to be more clearly defined. I believe we need to come to reality and recognize that one teacher cannot do it all. We continue to get more and more piled on us, and it takes away from our ability to teach the most vulnerable populations. I understand that IEPs come with the territory, but writing an IEP and doing all the other jobs of people on campus is not part of my job. The job is already hard enough. Please stop making it so much harder. I won't last much longer in this career if it continues like this, and I don't want to leave. I just want this job to feel manageable and successful, not like I'm juggling several plates and breaking them all. The next comments are from Kayla Cheers. I am a special education student at Sweetwater High. I have listened to the board meetings. I have heard on numerous occasions the board state, quote, "We didn't know." So I am here to inform you. The current structure of special education in this district is infeasible in the long run. Rather than have any real structures in place that would benefit the students, the district continues to cut programs and services for students and stack responsibilities onto case managers. Today, I will start with credit recovery. Credit recovery is a robust program for general education, but for special education, we are a last thought. At one time, we were funded through special services and able to give students the one-on-one attention they need in order to access the curriculum and complete the missing credits for graduation. Special services decided to discontinue funding the program, and now special education credit recovery is being funded through the same funding as general education. At my site, this means that we are allotted 2 special education teachers to teach all fundamental courses. One teacher is responsible for up to 8 different courses. General education teachers are responsible for 1 course, both semesters at most. This is nothing against Sweetwater High, who is doing their best to provide us with something that, with the limited resources they were provided. The blame falls completely on the district office and special services for discontinuing the program without understanding how it would impact our students. Because of these rash, uneducated decisions, there is now another roadblock in place for our students with disabilities to graduate. I have heard from teachers at other schools sites principals are not funding special education credit recovery at all. Special education teachers are working for free. So now you can't say, quote, we didn't know. When decisions are made at the district office, are students even a consideration? Did anybody stop to think, how would cutting funding for special education credit recovery impact our students? It appears not. The next comments are from Kathleen Cheers. Good evening. I have been inundated with emails and telecoms venting frustration with the current state of Sweetwater affairs. I compare it to a fish beached, flailing back and forth, attempting to get back to water. I have tried to be empathetic to you all as I understand these are unprecedented times, recommending patients and parents contact you personally. Their follow-ups back to me heartbreaking. Quote, Mrs. Cheers, all I got back from those who took the time to respond, lip service. They know no more than I do. In my opinion, which I know doesn't mean a ruddy rat to you, you are lost and you are waiting for city schools or LA Unified because you do not have the direction at the helm that has the expertise to lead, and so you follow. We are one of the largest school districts in the nation, and we sit adrift with no expertise. We have the blind leading the blind and have become the laughingstock of the National School Board Association. The closed session was a cluster funk, not the word Mrs. Cheers would have normally used. You terminated the superintendent in a deceitful manner, failing to give any group or persons the opportunity to weigh in. The decision was yours, and whether one supported the vote or didn't, you have the vote and the legal right, but why the deceit? Then you were so cowardice, you have the district spokesperson use the pitiful response, quote, we don't discuss personal matters. Then after being confronted with the illegality of your decision, you finally advise him to speak the truth. You broke the Brown Act. So once again, who is the legal firm that you conspired with in devising this underhanded, unprofessional, illegal plan? Have they been fired yet? And who's sitting on that dais broke closed session and either leaked it or had one of your BFF conspirators do so? I take exception to the fact we, the community, are being represented by a school board that is controlled by union leadership. You are supposed to be our representatives, whose efforts should be focused on our students' education. We, the community, have always supported teachers. Yet now we see that even their needs and their commitment to their students are being overshadowed by politics. The last time I made a similar statement in reference to the past leadership, I lost the friendship of a devout union member. That still hurts. But I was right, wasn't I? Politics has taken over. Independent representation by our board be damned. I believe in unions, but will always support teachers. But it is those in position of power who are using their title for self-betterment that repulses me. Your hardworking, dedicated, selfless, heroic teachers need true representation, not the politics currently at play. In closing, I will continue to speak up for a demographic I am committed to, our special ed population and the teachers, counselors, and IAs who support the students. You are failing them. You have brushed them aside while raking in millions on their behalf. Surely you are hearing students who are struggling, as are their teachers. Try multiplying that substantially for the needs of this deserving population. Your report this evening lists IEPs, but in the words of the infamous commercial, and with no intent of humor being interjected, where is the beef? The next comments are from Laura Galvan Estrada. As a parent with 4 children in the district in 4 different schools, it's been a nightmare to keep track of attendance, grades, assignments, and distance learning. Teachers are scrambling for an efficient way to take attendance. Each instructor is making his or her own policies on how they take attendance. An assignment, a comment in the chat, a verbal here through synchronous video, etc. Multiply that times 6 classes for each child. As a parent, I have to figure that out for 24 teachers. Additionally, each school has different procedures for clearing absences. There are different variations of calls, emails, sending handwritten notes if the parent is excusing the absence. Then there is the whole process of checking each child's absences, quizzing the child about being absent, figuring out if the teacher missed it or the child didn't do X, Y, or Z to be marked present. There are not even calls alerting to marked absences the first weeks of the semester. In face-to-face instruction, a student shows up in class and is marked present whether she completed an assignment or not, or whether she fell asleep or not. My plea is for consistency in taking attendance and providing teachers with the tools, software they need to make attendance taking efficient. I know the school district loses with absences, and a lot of those absences are not true absences. Keeping track of missing assignments grades is also a nightmare. The easiest as a parent is for all grades assignments to be in Jupyter grades. They are not. It is extremely time-consuming to have to log into each child's Google Classroom course to find out. At the moment, I have to check Jupyter Grades, Google Classroom, and their email accounts. I know teachers are overworked. Of 24 teachers, I've gotten communication from only one regarding missing work. Please stick to consistent platforms. For example, saying Zoom is not to be used, then using it, and then stopping, and then using it again is not right. Please, no more changes to schedules. Starting at the same time each day was perfect. If you needed to tweak something for staff, changing the start time for students 4 weeks into the semester was not right. I am not trying to make excuses for myself or any of my children. I am pleading for more consistency throughout the district whenever possible, and to listen to teachers as to what tools they need to make tasks like attendance and recording grades easier for them. The next comments are from Maria Fontamayor. To President Segura and members of the school board, I am Maria Fontamayor, the President of the Council for Teaching Filipino Language and Culture of San Diego. I am writing again to let you know that I am still waiting to see a concrete implementation of the school district's belief statements, believing in relationships and collaboration, the value of community voice in decision-making, and believing in a culture of trust based on integrity and transparency. I would like to see that our group as a Filipino-American community will be able to collaborate and be given the voice as a member of this school district. I will never forget that Mary Rose Peralta and Jason Josephat were demoted. I still believe that they were treated unfairly. They are both leaders who exercise sincerity, give full commitment to the students, assisted their coworkers to the fullest, and even recognized for their outstanding leadership by the school district and the community. But they were taken out of their jobs. I still would like to see them be put back to the positions they were supposed to stay. Together with the Filipino community members, I will continue sending my messages to your leadership until we are given the respect we deserve. We will keep on asking for the creation of a Filipino-American Advisory Council to directly voice our concerns to the superintendent and be responsible for the A, development of an equity oversight with other Sweetwater Union High School District stakeholders, focusing on ensuring that all students receive an excellent education as well as equal opportunity and diversity. B, equal hiring and advancement for faculty and personnel. And C, implementation of equity in the curriculum and support for Filipino American students. It is my hope that this comment will give you something to reflect on. The next comments are from Shelley Poliska. At last month's board meeting, Frank Tarantino casually mentioned how important it was to relay data to the public about all the teacher positions that were saved. No doubt in an attempt to bolster public opinion of a district that still suffers from antipathy from many. Do you really think the hundreds of people whose lives you disrupted by voting to RIF them will say thank you for the opportunity to spend the summer looking for a job, worrying about where their next paycheck will come from, or how to pay for necessary health care for their families? Then you are a fool because we are not your dogs, cowed into licking the boot of our abusive master. You have missed the mark once again, seemingly unaware or purposely obtuse about how your actions and decisions really impact people. If you were not stepping down from the board at the end of your term, be assured that I would work like a person possessed to unseat you in the next election. Clearly, as the PAC chair 2 years ago, I made a mistake in helping convince membership that you are an ally when you are clearly an enemy to the people who work for Sweetwater. The next comments are from Tom Leet. Good evening, Superintendent board members. In July, I asked you for one tool, the ability to give secure online tests. During your discussion, you mentioned that we would learn more at the SUHSD professional development. Unfortunately, that training was not helpful. When asked how to give a secure exam, the presenters were unprepared for the question and could only suggest that we do like the College Board did with AP exams, have students use lockdown browsers during the exam and be on camera so we could watch them. Unfortunately, per board policy, we cannot force students to be on camera. Furthermore, lockdown browsers require all students to use a common browser. For instance, Google Forms that integrate with Google Classroom require the Chrome browser. And lockdown browsers still may not prevent other forms of communication via independent apps during exams. I have heard that students are using chat apps like Discord to communicate with each other in real time during online instruction. I have heard rumors that there is an underground economy thriving in our district as students offer each other cash payments for test answers. We do not have secure testing. Our grades will all be suspect. This problem must be addressed at a district-wide level. I repeat my request. I need a secure online testing platform. I am not alone in that need. I know that this will not be easy, but it is essential. Thank you for your time. The next comments are from Teresa Camacho. I am very concerned with special ed moderate severe students being the guinea pig to be the first students to go back. First of all, it is not safe yet for anyone to return to school. Of our moderate severe students, most have underlying health conditions. In looking at my own class this semester, half have had open heart surgery in their life and still have heart issues. Several others have multi-health issues as well. Most of my students have not left their home during this pandemic except to maybe ride around in a car and go back home due to health concerns and the pandemic. Most of our students will not wear a mask. They have body fluid issues, whether it be snot or saliva from drooling. When they use the restroom, they may not hit the toilet. Most also require hygiene assistance, diaper changes, help during their menstrual cycle, and feeding assistance. We are not medical professionals, we are teachers. We deal with these issues normally, but should not be asked to deal with this during a pandemic when germs are the concern. It is unfair of you to think that the moderate severe population and the staff and teachers that teach them can be the guinea pig for the district. Yes, distance learning is not perfect for them, but it's not perfect for any student. We, the teachers, are working long hours to meet our students' needs through distance learning. Please do not send us back until it is safe or until you personally feel safe sitting in my class along with us daily, each and every day. The next comments are from Vicki McDonough. I am very concerned with the consideration of special ed moderate severe students being brought back to campus in the first group still during a pandemic and the start of flu season. How are the health and well-being of this population being taken into consideration? Most of our students will not wear a mask and they need staff within 6 feet of them during their daily school teaching. Most require hygiene assistance, diaper changes, help during their menstrual cycle, cleaning drool and snot, and feeding assistance. Most take the school bus and are seated 2 to a seat on a small bus. Is the bus driver going to take temperatures of each student before the student is allowed on the bus? How are students going to be placed on the bus and kept at 6 feet distance from each other and have masks and hands to themselves? What PPE and precautions are being set in place for these students, teachers, and staff? Most students have underlying health issues along with their disabilities. Are we going to be the guinea pigs for the district because of the scare the district will be sued for special ed services? What about thinking about how to keep the most vulnerable population safe and alive? There are no further comments.
Thank you, Deanne. Let me move here. Clerk of the board, will you please read the items being pulled from the consent agenda? Could you go real slow since I didn't have a printer to print out the.
Sure. And I emailed it to you. The following items are
thank
pulled. You're welcome. Item F3 has been pulled by staff. Item G4 has been pulled by Mr. Tarantino. Item G7 has been pulled by staff, Mr. Tarantino, and the public. Item K2 has been pulled by staff. Item K3 has been pulled by staff and the public. Item M1 has been pulled by the public. And item M2 has been pulled by the public.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
So moved.
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Arturo and seconded by
I'll
Mr.
second.
Vote, please.
Adamos?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. We'll move to F3. And who would like to go?
Sure, I can start if you don't mind.
Thank you, sir.
Well, just some brief. I just wanted to mention that I went to the Sweetwater Centennial. It was a really nice event. So I want to thank Dr. Gavin and Ms. Garcia, Ms. Morris for everything they did. It was a wonderful event. We were all spaced out. It would have been nice to have everybody show up, but it was, with the situation, we can't have that. But I know they put the video online, so feel free to check that out. So 100 years of Sweetwater. And I want to also thank all the teachers and all the staff for all the work that they're doing. I know this is some tough times, and it's difficult, but we really appreciate all the work that you're doing. And please continue to keep us abreast of what's happening, what you need, and we'll do the best we can. So thank you.
Thank you. Who would like
I'll
to go
go
next? Thank you, Mr. Pike.
I will. Based on some of the comments that were made, I would like to do some follow-up, make sure we're doing the attendance consistently throughout the district. So not everybody's doing their own thing. Let's get something straight across the board so everybody's on the same page, so there's not a lot of problems or issues. And also, I think what the teacher was saying about secure online testing, I think that's important. And so if we're gonna have them doing online testing like that, I think they need to have that secure in progress, in place. And if it says that we're not required to have them, their pictures on the, she made some comment about being able to, all the students aren't required to be on. Well, maybe for the testing, we should make it so that they have to be on so we can watch them. And I agree with our person from the county, Nick. That was a great thing to do, because I really believe what he said is true. I think people are starting to forget, and that was a good reminder. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll go next. How's that? Over the last couple weeks, I actually attended virtually, obviously, my daughter's open house at Castle Park, the IB program. Listened to that. With Mr. Monroe, learned a lot, and they have a lot going on there. And I appreciate all the work of not only Mr. Monroe and the IB program, but all the teachers and educators that are doing their best online. And appreciate my daughter working through that as well. It's really tough on the students, as we all know. But I did listen in on that. Also, there was a comment on by the public about SPED credit recovery and that not being funded by principals. I kind of like to know what's happening with that, sir. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
I'll go next.
Thank you, sir.
Just like President Gouda, I attended virtually the open houses of Otay Ranch High School and Eastlake High School. And again, great effort by both sites and principals, Ms. Pedroza and Dr. Cook. I was really impressed with the creativity in terms of how the teachers, and you can click on their classroom and get part of their syllabus. You can get their syllabus and their a bio of themselves, and how they went about doing it was very creative. And each teacher used their own creativity and special talents to bring that across. And I know that it wasn't optimal. But really, having attended open houses in person, I really think that that this format really lent itself to having the people who are listening in really being able to listen to the teacher and get some sense as to how they were going to be teaching the class, what their expectations were, and also how they were going to reach out and help parents as well as students that were having trouble. So again, kudos to the schools that put that together. And I look forward to attending Rancho Del Rey's open house later on this week. And the Girl Scouts of San Diego recently honored 66 Girl Scouts who earned the prestigious Gold Award. And there were 3 students from our district that were mentioned. Roxana Javier and Lucia Perez Valles from Olympian High School, as well as Elisa Olszewski from Bonita Vista High School. Congratulations. My understanding is this is a very coveted award, and nice job for attaining that. And that's all I have, President Segura.
Thank you, Mr. Tarantino. Ms. Hall?
I don't have any comments tonight. Thank you. Except I will say I really appreciate the situation. Everybody's working hard. It is difficult, but I do appreciate the efforts being made by staff, by our teachers, and by the parents and families to make sure we keep moving forward and that as best we can, we're serving our students and students are engaged. And I thank Ms. Adamo for bringing us the information from the students. I think it's very important that we hear what they feel and think, and hearing that they're in agreement about only when it's safe. That is the key, I believe I'm hearing from her, and I appreciate that as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Okay, with that, we'll move to G4, the memorandum of understanding with the Alliance for African Assistance.
Yeah, I pulled that, President Segura, and my question was, I know that in the analysis and in the contract, it mentions that there will be translation services for Filipino, for the Filipino language, but what other languages will this organization provide assistance with in terms of translation? If we know what they are.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Tarantino. I will ask Dr. Ana Maria Alvarez to respond to that question. Broadly speaking, this is in response to some requests we have had from various communities about translation, but I'll ask Dr. Alvarez to add. Ana Maria.
Good evening, Dr. Aguirre, board members. Mr. Tarantino, that is a great question. The Alliance for African Assistance actually provides translation and interpretation services for not only translation, but also will provide document translation for us in over 200 languages, starting from Acholi all the way to Zulu. You know, in terms of some of the languages that we see in our district, Arabic, Farsi, we have some students that are French, we have some students that are Nepali. I can provide for the board a cover sheet that lists every single one of the languages. Most notably, this organization was hired to support Tagalog and Filipino in our district. But as I mentioned, there are over 200 different languages that the organization supports.
Great. Thank you very much. That's all I had.
Any more questions, comments from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval of G4.
So moved. I'll second. How's that?
Great. Moved by Solis, seconded by Mr. Tarantino. Vote, please.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Great. And board, if you have a question or comment, just please say so, because I have the screen. I have my screen on the actual item. Didn't print anything out, like I said earlier today. So with that, we'll move to G7. I believe there's a presentation with that.
Yes, and we do have public comment. Would you like to hear the presentation first and then take the public comment?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Alvarez?
Okay, just give me 1 second so that I can load the PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
Sure, it comes up. Are you able to see that?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. Let me open it one more time. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Make sure. Okay. Good evening, Board President Segura and our esteemed board members, staff, and community. This evening, we are going to discuss the Learning and Attendance Plan, Continuity Plan, also known as the Learning Continuity Plan, or LCP. Senate Bill 98 suspended the annual local control and accountability plan for the 2020-2021 school year. In addition, school districts in California, instead of issuing the LCAP, were required to create the Learning Continuity Plan to ensure that stakeholders' voices were heard. Over the last 5 months, as a district, we have been working on elements of the Learning and Continuity and Attendance Plan through the Sweetwater Reopening Plan for distance learning and in-person instruction. As a reminder, we had over 100 people, many stakeholders, including teachers, counselors, administrators, parents, community members, and students, participating in 4 major work groups.
Dr. Alvarez?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. The dog got more attention than I did. Sorry about that. So students and teachers and staff members.
Can anybody else hear her?
Yeah, you can't hear her, Mr. Segura? I think he's having sound issues. Go ahead, Anna Maria.
Okay. 4 different work groups were created during the summer months. This reopening plan was presented in July prior to opening school in August. As we developed the plans, we wanted to ensure that all of our stakeholders had the opportunity to engage in feedback. I've listed here some of the feedback opportunities. We conducted several surveys, including surveys for parents, teachers, staff, and students. We included feedback from the 4 stakeholder groups focused on teaching and learning, safety, parent engagement, and cohesive systems across the district. We had several town hall meetings, which also included 2 board presentations, and we are following up with additional support and presentations to the DPAC and DLAC, which are scheduled later for this week. We also are going to meet with our principals on Tuesday and our union partners later this week and next week for them to provide additional feedback. As one of the requirements, feedback from the San Diego County Office of Education is also included. We will be incorporating their guidance into the document as we met with them on Friday to review their comments and suggestions. All of this will be included in our final update on September 28th. The Learning Continuity Plan has several elements. It includes our approach for distance learning, our approach for in-person instruction, the professional development, pupil learning loss, supports for mental health and social emotional well-being, and elements regarding nutrition services. It also highlights the supports provided for English learners, students with disabilities, students experiencing homelessness, students and youth in foster care, low-income students. All of these areas will be addressed in this presentation and are included in the plan that has been uploaded. As a reminder, distance learning, our plan included teacher professional development and overview of how devices and connectivity were provided for students. As was mentioned earlier by one of our parents, we did discuss the video conferencing platforms, and we tried to maintain those to 1 to each site. We also address learning management systems and trying to keep it simple for our students and for our staff. As a teaching and learning team, in particular with our teachers on special assignment, we created documents that highlighted the essential standards for courses in our core areas. We also looked at methods for tracking student engagement and attendance and providing support for diverse learners. We wanted to ensure that these elements were in place, along with safety for all of our staff and students, as we provided a distance learning option. At this time, in-person instruction will not occur until public health conditions permit us to do so. As Dr. Aguirre mentioned in his opening, we have metrics that we have developed within our opening plan. Those include the 14-day county averages, the 14-day average within the district. The county has now developed a 7-day metric, and we're also following that as we review our opening plan. This decision, as was noted, will not be made until September 21st, but it will rely heavily on all the data available to us up to that point. Once we have decided if a transition to in-person instruction is safe to do so, we will do this in a gradual manner. We have 5 stages in this transition. We are currently in the first stage, which is in person. The second stage would support a cohort model of up to 10% of students at each school site. We would determine the students with the greatest need based on academic and social emotional needs. The third stage is up to 20%, where students would be onboarded in a model that they would attend once a week in person, and the rest would be through distance learning. The fourth stage is 50%. Students would be attending every other day, twice a week. And the other days would be for asynchronous instruction through distance learning. Stage 5 would mean that we would be able to open up completely and would provide us a sense of normalcy for our instruction. Once again, these are all based on the public health conditions. It's part of our continuous plan to support students through professional development. We wanted to ensure that the opening of school PD included procedures and supports for the learning management system, how to create online courses, understanding by design, which was the program supported by SUHSD, understanding tools for synchronous and asynchronous instruction, as well as specific supports for content. The ongoing professional development across this year will also focus on social emotional learning, supports for equity, access and inclusion, trauma-informed care, and then of course, supports for our neediest students, including our English learners, students with disabilities, low-income students, students experiencing homelessness, and youth in foster homes. The diverse learners require additional supports, as well as teachers that have the strategies to ensure academic and psychosocial success. Pupil learning loss is one of the major issues that we're concerned with in terms of teaching and learning. We understand and we know that students experience learning loss during this pandemic. As we look at the spring program, we transitioned to distance learning pretty much overnight. Although supports and training were provided, we made a fast transition. In the spring, students were provided academic support, enrichment, but most of the instruction was done asynchronously. We now know that as the start of the school year, as we transition to a synchronous model, it's extremely important that students have access to all the coursework, to materials, to devices and connectivity. So in order to make sure that we know where our students stand, we are looking at assessments, and those assessments include, but are not limited to, the current status in students' English courses, English language development, and mathematics. At this time, for the first 6 weeks of school, we have relied heavily on teacher formative and summative assessments. And part of that was part of the MOU that we developed collaboratively with SEA. Teachers wanted the time to know their students, to understand where they were, and to assess where students were and what their needs were. As part of this assessment, teachers as well as administrators and counselors are monitoring students. We are also going to be using core district survey. The core districts provide a survey that allow us to ascertain where students are in terms of their level and proficiency, not only academically, but also emotionally. We're also going to focus with the Smarter Balance interim assessments that are content driven so that we can assess where students are. We're looking at district performance tests that we normally offer during the school year. We will be offering them once in the fall and once in the spring. And our end of course exams also will be provided once in the fall and once in the spring. Based on this data that we get from these formative and summative assessments, both site directed, teacher directed, and district directed, we will be providing interventions and supports in the form of case management, intensive supports for academic needs such as tutoring, one-on-one instruction, small group instruction. We may offer also extended learning opportunities, including Saturday academies that are not for attendance makeup, but for really accelerating student learning. We're looking at our expanded credit recovery programs, the reinstatement of our learning centers, and then also ensuring that we have elements to measure the effectiveness of these supports. As I mentioned, there are many diverse learners that have exhibited potential pupil learning loss, but we're going to highlight a few of them. For English learners, we continue to focus on designated and integrated ELD. The English language development that is called designated ELD provides a specific time during the day for ELD teachers to provide lessons to our English learners, specifically about English language development and proficiency. The focus in designated ELD is to assure that language skills are developed using content from the English course, and it focuses on the ELD standards. Our integrated ELD courses support core content areas. That means that our core content teachers are teaching content lessons with language supports. The standards addressed in the integrated ELD are content standards. So for example, if I'm a science teacher, I'm teaching science. However, I am integrating English language development standards so that students are not only teachers of language, but they're also teacher of content. Our teams will monitor student progress. We will provide extended learning opportunities, and targeted small group instruction will be provided for our English learners. For our students with disabilities, they will receive many of the same types of services that are provided for the English learners. Some additional elements include case management, where they do have a case manager or case carrier that works directly with the student. We have assistive technology and is all elements of the individualized education plan. We need to ensure that we're meeting the supports provided in those plans for our students. For homeless and foster youth and students experiencing low-income status, we will be providing needs assessments conducted by our teams. As you know, for our homeless and foster youth, we do have a family engagement team that works directly with students. That includes a program manager, a counselor on special assignments, and therapists that help to support. We will be making phone calls and connecting with families to support attendance, academic progress, and ensuring that we are providing targeted interventions and supports such as tutoring, connection to community resources such as food banks, providing transportation, family and student mental health, and ensuring that each of our students are receiving devices and connectivity. When we first began this school year, Dr. Gomez and her team contacted every single student that had been identified as experiencing homelessness or foster care and ensured that they had either a device and or a hotspot so that they would be able to access the curriculum. One of the elements that is new, the entire learning continuity plan is new. However, that is new in terms of the approach from a systemic manner is the focus on mental health and social and emotional well-being, not only for students, but also for teachers. It is important that as a district, we focus on this. In a pandemic, this has been truly a traumatic time for our staff and for our students. For students, we focused on social emotional learning at the beginning of the year and continue to infuse those lessons. We're providing trauma-informed care, restorative practices that has been a district measure over the last 5 years, is continuing to play a big role in the services that we provide for our students. We're also providing counseling services from our school counselors and nursing services. These nursing services at this time need to be highlighted. For many of our students, the nursing services are really the primary health care for our students, particularly in schools that receive Title I funding. This last component of the community health partners, for example, with San Isidro and South Bay Community Services and other local agencies, we continue to offer wraparound services for families through a referral process. For teachers, ensuring that teachers are getting the resources needed and that referrals to EASE and other healthcare provider supports are highlighted. We want to ensure that teachers know where the resources are and how to access them. Our counselors are also providing support through Wellness Wednesdays that provide useful tips and supports not only for students, but for staff. Our administrators are doing check-in with staff to monitor how they're doing, how they're feeling, and what supports they need. We want to make sure that each person working during this pandemic in a remote setting or in the future in a in-person setting has the support necessary to ensure their well-being so that they can remain productive in their role as a student or as a teacher. We want our community healthy. A survey for staff will also be developed in conjunction with our labor partners to monitor progress throughout the year. As has been present in all the presentations that we've conducted regarding the reopening or in this plan, nutrition services has been such a critical feature for our community. At this time, we've served over 1.5 million meals to our community, to our students ages 2 to 18. We recently received a waiver from the United States Department of Agriculture that approved what's called a seamless summer method of food distribution. This means that once again, we will be able to serve our community, students 2 to 18 at each of our sites. All of our schools are providing nutritious meals. Once we transition to an in-person instruction when that occurs, we will continue to ensure that the safety precautions and health guidelines will be continued to be followed in the meal distribution. We know that feeding the body also feeds the soul, and we want to make sure our students are not hungry and are well maintained. So this last major slide is a highlight of the major actions and services. The plan is approximately 31 pages, and there's quite a bit of information in there. But some of the highlights are Connectivity and devices have certainly been part of the largest expenditures for us. As we all know, last year we had determined that seniors would not be getting devices and that we would be looking at transitioning our one-to-one initiative into another model. However, with the pandemic, it's been certainly highlighted that devices and connectivity are essential for any type of distance learning. So we focused $5 million to provide that support. We've also focused on professional development. That includes teacher time for English language development for our students with disabilities. That will be ongoing throughout the school year to provide the needed tools and resources for our teachers. Credit recovery and Saturday academies are part of the extension in terms of providing additional time for students and teachers to ensure that our students are getting what they need. Curriculum development was developed during the summer, and part of that funding was used to create those shell courses for our teachers. And then the second largest expenditure is really looking at when we return back to in-person instruction, although some of this has already been utilized for sites as they've transitioned to small number of staff members working on site. So sanitation and cleaning products and personal protective equipment will be continued to be purchased by the district to ensure that we have all the resources needed. So at this point, we will be, as I mentioned, on Wednesday, this plan will be presented to DLAC and DPAC for their review. The principals will have an opportunity, as will our labor partners, to discuss and give input. The cabinet also has provided input. Any questions that come from the board, any guidance from the board, will be modified and added to the September 28th item. And on that day, we'll do a small presentation of only those changes that have occurred in the plan. And hopefully we'll be able to approve the plan. Once it goes from board approval, it goes to the county. The county has an ability to respond and let us know if there's any other elements, although the county does not have oversight in approving the final plan. The board does. So at this time, I thank you. If there are any questions, I would be willing to take those at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. That's a very good presentation. Do we have any comments or questions from the board?
You want to take public comment first?
Public comments first, absolutely. And I know Mr. Tarantino pulled it as well.
Yes. I have 4 speakers to this item. The first comments are from Kayla Cheers. I am a special education teacher at Sweetwater High. A common message the board puts out is their lack of understanding of what is actually going on at the school sites. There has been no attempt from the board to speak with teachers to gain an understanding, but rather the board and those in charge continue to make uneducated decisions. The current school reopening plan has no money going to special education, but cites case management as a method to address learning loss. Since there is no money going to special education, one can easily assume the district is going to expect their already overworked special education teachers to address this. My question is, when? Case management alone, at the very minimum, totals to 121 extra hours of work per year outside of the full schedule of teaching. We are provided 9 IEP days, 72 hours to get this work completed. The rest of the time we work from the kindness of our hearts. So how does the district expect the issue of learning loss to be addressed if we are not getting any funding to do so? The board and those in charge continue to ignore a failing special education program. Special education students regularly face the consequences of poor district decision-making and money management. Programs and supports continue to be cut and responsibilities continue to be piled on to case managers who cannot possibly provide the services needed in the limited time we have. More money is needed for special education. Decisions made about special education need to be done so with input of those who actually understand what is going on, the teachers. This reopening plan makes no sense. It ignores special education completely, the very students who are being impacted the most. How can special education students be supported if you are not going to provide the funding? The answer is they aren't. The district is simply going to continue to ignore them. The next comments are from Kathleen Shears. The name of the document is wrong. It is the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan. Reference the code.ca.gov website for confirmation. I am concerned that on one of the supporting documents, you have this agenda item listed as a first reading, yet on the other plan to be submitted, you indicate public hearing. Which is it? This plan is due by September 30th, leaving little time for the entire parental community and your entire Sweetwater teacher community the opportunity to weigh in. While understanding you put together an adjunct committee seeking input, what means of communicating this to parents and teachers at large has been done other than this agenda item? Once again, you reference PPE, specifically what PPE? Ms. Adado has asked 3 times for a presentation which would define how the CARES Act monies was spent. To date, nothing. Our community wants a detailed accounting, and by law, we are owed it. Why is there a substantial difference in community devices hotspots on the 2 attachments? One shows 3 million, the other 5 million. Please do not explain stating other costs have been factored in. You are required to clearly define how these monies are being spent, and it is expected you do so when submitting the info to the state. And yes, we will be following up on the final submission the state receives. Physical distance materials, 100,000. Please define specifically what materials, itemize the cost per bracket, or share where I can find that accounting without a PRA, which you are not responding due to COVID. Credit recovery. Please explain 1 million allotment in comparison to the allegations credit recovery is but a skeleton of what it once was, which has left many students whose individual educational needs are being ignored. My concern is every expenditure in the LCP is marked contributing to increased or improved services for EL, low income, or foster. Thermometers and cleaning supplies, how does that benefit at-risk student groups more than other students? District curriculum specialists, who are they? Are they new hires? Saturday Academy, please explain this is the new world of COVID. SPED students and their needs are all but ignored. You reference IEPs. No, the community of special ed parents wants to know, what are you doing to help this struggling, deserving demographic? Is this a financial saving strategy to lessen the deficit? Specifically by school, how many students are currently without devices? Have you provided IAs with devices? Where are the monies needed to support special ed teachers' efforts? Where are the IAs? How are you supporting their added in responsibilities? Thank you. The next comments are from Michelle Beal. Good evening, members of the board and Superintendents Aguirre and Carbuccia. I typically spend a significant amount of time trying to polish my comments, but I decided why waste the time? It's not as though the majority of you are listening. As I watch Ms. Facetto read public comments, Dr. Aguirre, you can't be bothered to look up from your desk to even pretend to engage, and most of the other board members don't fall too far behind. I don't think it's too much to ask that each of you pay attention to what the community and staff are bringing forth as concerns. As I reviewed the learning continuity and attendance plan, I just had to laugh and ask myself, do they really think that we, students, staff, and parents, are that dumb and don't see that this plan is an absolute joke? It always sounds great on paper, but where this district always falls short is follow through and implementation. You want us to believe that the district is really going to implement all these safety protocols and procedures for students and staff. We have been out of school for almost 7 months, and pretty much every classroom still looks the same. There's been no major cleaning or sanitizing going on. What's the district waiting for? Let me guess, you are just trying to save money. The plan also addresses mental health for students and staff. The plan identifies counselors as being available to students to assist with mental health issues. Counselors, now aren't those the very same employees that Ms. Carbuccia didn't want to recall and assign to schools, even though there was an overwhelming need? Yes, it was the counselors that Ms. Carbuccia didn't need to help open school. Well, despite Carbuccia's refusal to staff schools appropriately, the district ended up having to offer each laid-off counselor employment and has also had to hire sub-counselors. Now, because the district followed Ms. Carbuccia's guidance as HR director, the delay in bringing back counselors only put everyone further behind. Counselors are still trying to clean up master schedule issues from the opening of school. They're still trying to complete schedule changes. Some are still moving to their assigned sites and on a daily basis having to sort through hundreds of emails from students, staff, and community. How does the district propose the counselors not only clean up the mess they inherited because of Ms. Carbuccia, but also continue to serve the needs of our students? Here's a thought. Since the district saves so much money by not filling the counselor vacancies and refusing to retroactively pay counselors, why not offer counselors extra duty pay to help meet the needs of our students? After all, that money was already earmarked for counseling and the district should use it as such. Let me guess, the answer is no, you want to save money. I could go on and on about the proposed plan, but rather than do that, let's just talk about current working conditions. I can't even begin to tell you how frustrating this whole distance learning has been. Most of us still have outdated devices that half the time don't work. We've had to go out and buy new computers, printers, scanners, desks, and supplies. We've had to incur the cost of upgrading our internet at home just to be able to complete our jobs. We've literally had minimal support from the district, but now we are to believe that the district truly cares and is going to fully implement this plan. Well, if that's the case, why haven't you cared the last 7 months? The next comments are from Tom Leet. Good evening, Superintendent Board members. Regarding a return to in-person instruction, the first key point is this. Strong evidence suggests that the coronavirus transmits via aerosols, which are the smallest of mucus droplets released by normal breathing. A good model for mucus aerosols is cigarette smoke. A simple test regarding classroom safety is, if someone were smoking in the classroom, who would be exposed to secondary smoke and how long would it take? If the answer is that nobody would be inhaling secondary smoke, then that classroom is safe. How do we achieve this? 1, improved ventilation will be critical. Classrooms do not have enough airflow to pull air away from the people inside the room before they breathe in each other's exhaled aerosols. All classrooms must have a system of cross ventilation that actively pulls in outside air to replace classroom air every 15 minutes or less. To test this, go into every classroom, turn on the ventilation system, and light a cigarette. Then sit 6 feet from the cigarette. If you can smell the smoke, the system isn't good enough. 2, shorter classes and longer transition periods. Contact tracers define a close contact as spending 15 minutes less than 6 feet from another person who is not masked. Masks will extend the time, but not for an entire hour. Classes must be shortened, and every classroom must be completely vacated for enough time for a complete air change before people re-enter. That means that if classrooms completely replace their air every 15 minutes, every class must have at least a 15-minute gap between classes. If ventilation systems are improved so that the air change takes less time, transition periods can be shorter. If transition periods are not long enough for a complete air change, then the incoming staff and students will be breathing in the viruses still lingering in the aerosols in the air that the previous class breathed out. The second key point is that the community and country do not yet have the capability to limit outbreaks. In order for outbreaks to be contained, there must be 2 things. 1, enough virus testing capacity that results are returned within 48 hours at the maximum, less than 24 hours being preferred. And 2, enough contact tracers, roughly 1,000 for San Diego County, that contact tracing for every outbreak begins within 12 hours of detection. Has the county met those targets? According to the news last week, 75% of all tests are returning results in 3 days. No, we are not yet at a testing capacity that will allow us to contain outbreaks. As of the end of July, San Diego County had 565 contact tracers, not enough. Until we have the testing and contact tracing capability to contain outbreaks, reopening in-person education will be a detriment to the community as schools become the source of large outbreaks that send the community infection rate soaring. There are no further comments.
Thank you. Mr. Tarantino, I pulled this.
Thank you, President Segura. I would like to recommend some suggestions for consideration in the plan. I will begin on page 3 of 31. And I don't know, are we going to put it up on the screen or not?
You're looking at the actual plan, not
I'm looking at the actual plan, yes.
Okay, yes, 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
Page 3. In the second to the last paragraph, the last sentence, it reads, it is our responsibility to address these issues through the development of culturally responsive curriculum and training for our staff. I would like to recommend that that the action plan that Dr. Aguirre is putting together for the development of community advisory groups to address issues around Black Lives Matter and the Filipino community's concerns be added. I think that that is something that is something that's important, and we should make note of that. On page there's on page 8. There's constant mention of SSTs throughout this report, and how the student study teams work at each of the school sites. Well, I think we have to realize that not every site has a functioning SST, and so this isn't something to put in the report, but just something to think about. How are we going to ensure that the sites that don't have operating SSTs are going to get on board and have them? And who is going to be responsible for the accountability of seeing that these SSTs meet on a regular basis? In my opinion, they're one of the few positive interventions that we can provide for students and parents. And I think it's time. We've waited 5 years. I've waited 5 years to hear that they're fully functional at each site. And I think 5 years is enough time. And so that's just OBTW. Oh, by the way. On page 23 of 31, under school counselor services, and also for everything that's on this page, I think that, and I'll use the school counselor one as an example. School counselors are available at each school site to support students with academic, socially, emotionally, and college and career counseling. I think it's important to also include alternative education programs. I know that probably the inference at each school site kind of infers that it's throughout the system, but I think it's important to call out, especially the alternative ed programs that we have currently in the district, independent studies, the 3 learning centers, and the Launch Academy. And on page 29, this is the last one, my last suggestion. Under foster youth, I think it's important that we also note that for our foster youth and for other specific populations, we do implement the California Grad Plan in order to help mitigate the roadblocks that certain student populations have had to endure in terms of gaining their education. And that's all I have, President Segura.
Thank you, Mr. Tarantino. Any other board members have comments or questions in regards?
I'll just say thank you.
Ms. Hall, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank staff for the work they've done to this point on the plan. You know, they are doing a tremendous lot of work. And I want to thank Mr. Tarantino. I believe his points are really, really great. They're very good. I think we should have a list from staff. And I've already asked that of Dr. Aguirre, so he already has that ask about who makes up the SST teams for each of our schools. I would like to make sure that we know what that hierarchy is at each school so that we are assured that it is already established and we can understand the functionality as it is, as Mr. Terracino said, accountability. So I just wanted to say that. I have nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Anybody else? This is the first reading, correct? And so
Yes, no action required.
Then how does it work from here? Can you please educate? Okay, but just going forward, so where it becomes the final document is what I'm asking.
Do you want Maria to answer that, or you want me to answer that?
I can answer that if you don't mind.
Okay.
So, Mr. Segura, what we'll be doing is this week and for part of next week, we will consolidate all the input that has been provided by the stakeholders and by the board. We will incorporate that into the plan and bring back the revised plan for September 28th. At the September 28th meeting, that's when it would be placed on the board agenda for approval. At that point, we have 5 days after that board meeting to submit it to the County Office of Education. They then have 15 days to provide their feedback and input to us. As I mentioned before, the county does not have purview of approving the plan, but they can provide us guidance. And the guidance that they've provided us so far has been spot on. And so we will continue to work with the county to make sure that we have all the required elements.
Thank you. And if one of our stakeholders wants to give input, could you please say how that would happen?
Yes, we're going to put the plan on the front page of the website with a Google formatted input survey so that anyone can provide feedback on the plan.
Thank you. So that's it for G7. No action. So we can move to K2.
Dr. Zalkeld.
Thank you, ma'am. So let me transition here and share the presentation. Okay, can everyone see it at this time? It comes through okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So good evening, Board President Segura, Board Trustees, Dr. Aguirre, Cabinet, and the community. So what we're going to be presenting tonight is our unaudited actuals for fiscal year 2019-20. It is the final financial results for our revenues and our expenditures for the fiscal year. As you can see here on the overview, we're going to highlight a couple of the key changes regarding the financials, and then a couple of other of our district funds that are included in the package that you have on the agenda item, which is the standardized account code structure report, which is known as our SACS report. That document is what gets submitted to our County Office of Ed, as well as the California Department of Education. And so just to provide some background on the unaudited actuals, because over the course of the last year, when we brought forward to the board the reporting cycles, such as our interims and so forth, it has been focused on projections of our budget, where we anticipate the end of the year to end up at. And so at this point, these are actual results. We're no longer looking at the budgets. We are looking at what the numbers tie to revenue calculations, such as our local control funding formula calculator, looking at, you'll hear us say accruals quite often, both on the revenue side of things and the expenditure. Our goal, the finance team, along collectively, actually say the fiscal services team, the accountants and the analysts, along with the management team, has been looking at all of the transactions that are related to the fiscal year 19-20. We want to ensure that we capture every revenue that's attributed to that fiscal year, as well as expenditure, because the goal is you do not want to have it transition into the next year if possible. This is what I've shared with staff and with others is we want to have audit ready. It's this financial information that our external audit team, CROW, will be testing. They've already commenced some of that work at our school sites. But through this period now, through the end of December, they will be looking at and testing the various schedules, the various reconciliations as it relates to 1920. And we get a lot of our guidance from the County Office of Education, as well as School Services of California, in terms of when you hear us say we're closing the books for the fiscal year. And so what I'm going to highlight here in this particular slide is to provide the board and the public a point of reference. We looked at the last 5 years of the financial results that have been presented at this point in September of each year. And just to kind of note, there were some challenging timeframes, obviously in 16, 17, and 17, 18. My first report to the board 2 years ago was the 17, 18 financial results. And what you can see, and we'll transition here to the next slide, and move that out of the way. We are showing a positive financial result for 1920. A lot of that is attributed to the school closures, and we'll share that here in a bit on the next slide. So on this next slide is what I mentioned earlier, the different reporting periods. So this is 1920 in a snapshot view throughout the year, where we've brought to the board what we anticipate the financials to end up at this point in time. And what I'll do is I'll share each of these different sections here to provide some details. Because again, a lot of this is reflected in your SACS report. One area to note here again is where we started the year off for 18-19, because how we end is what rolls into the next year. So this negative $3.7 million is the fund balance, how we started the year. As we started to do our audit work with our external audit team, we identified some restatements and we recorded it back at first interim. So you see this 1.2 million that's been static throughout the year. One thing to note, and I noted at the end of the presentation as well, but we will be bringing forward, it has been some time, but we've been working very closely with our external auditors regarding the 2018-19 financial audit. The goal is to bring that forward to the Audit and Finance Subcommittee meeting on the 21st, and then to the board on the 28th. So we will have updated information at that time. We anticipate that this number will be adjusted, but it will be favorable. But again, this information will be updated here in the near future. But at this point in time, it shows a negative 5 million. So that's kind of our opening standpoint. As it relates to revenues, as you can see, and again, looking at these different line items, whether it's our state local control funding formula, federal, or other state, we've been holding pretty close to these numbers. And I'd like to point out column D, because estimated actuals is where we brought to the board in June as part of budget adoption, where we anticipated, and then also subsequent with the 45-day budget revision, where we anticipated 1920 to end. And you can see in a district this large in terms of the revenues, we were pretty spot on. Our LCFF calculator, as an example, we go through, we review it, make sure all of the variables are up to date with the latest information we have from the state, because that's what locks in our average daily attendance, our unduplicated student percentage, different variables, property taxes, things like that, that we get from the County Office of Ed or from the County of San Diego Treasurer. And so as an example, during our review process over the summer, we engaged the County Office of Ed. They reviewed our calculator, similar to what we do in these other reporting periods. So we've had that second set of eyes before we hand off to our external auditors that calculation. Same thing with any of these federal revenues. You see a slight change on the state, and that's attributed to when we as the district receive from the state the final number for the lottery monies. So that's why there's a little bit of an uptick there of a couple $100,000. But again, we record because now we have those final numbers from outside entities, such as the state or other parties, that we balance to. And that becomes our number for the fiscal year end. So again, a slight increase, just about a little over $1 million. That positive increase goes to the bottom line. The other key area that I'd like to shift from the expenditure standpoint, again, this is where I mentioned earlier accruals. We ensure that we capture all of our payroll accruals, all of our invoices throughout the year. We have purchase orders that we look at to encumber and hold dollars for services or supplies. And then we get to the end of the year and we make sure have all those invoices come in for what we anticipated we would be spending. And so as you can see here from a salary and benefit perspective, again, we were very spot on. Again, throughout the year, we've been providing the board an update along the way, but where we closed the year, our numbers were very much in alignment with what we estimated back in June. So very, very close. Where you start to see some changes and very much attributed to the school closures are in the areas of supplies, contracted services. Supplies, an example is related to the fact that we did not have transportation services happening from mid-March through June. Supplies incorporates fuel. Fuel is a line item that rolls into that category. So there were savings in that area that we didn't anticipate. Certainly when things eventually resume business as usual in the future, again, these are one-time savings. But I can't stress enough that this is one-time in nature. As we progress and then when we provide the board the first interim update for the 2021 year, we're going to have to evaluate all of that activity, but for the next year. And then going forward as we transition back to brick and mortar in the future. So that is one area where you can see we anticipated about 6.2 million, came in at 4.7. The next line item, contracted services, same approach, less expenditures in that area. Well, one item to point, again, related to the closures, is utilities. Utility rolls up into contracted services, so all electricity, gas, and water, and so forth. And so again, for having that time period of the closures, there was about a $1.6 million one-time in nature savings that was recorded in terms of where we're at with our actuals. So again, another area kind of attributed to that. And then when you drop down here to the bottom, the other lines are kind of pretty lined up. And then we have our contributions. So our contributions was another area. This is dollars that are transitioned from the general fund unrestricted to the general fund restricted. Again, same approach, other areas. So that's about $9 million, almost $10 million in savings in that area. So when you look at all these, as I call them, the pluses or minuses or the puts and takes, in other words, it does have a favorable result operating from an operating standpoint of a little over $19 million. And if I go into the next slide, here's kind of an accounting of what I was just mentioning in areas of revenue, where you can see, again, we're closing out the year, we're able to pick up a couple $100,000. The areas of expenditures that I mentioned, the books and supplies, different areas here, and then the services and contracts, and then contributions. And then, but with that, so again, this particular slide, again, rolled what's also noted in your SACS report, certainly has a positive outcome, but it gave us an opportunity. So it's not, we can use that in a sense. This has given us the district as an opportunity, because if you recall in 17-18, that structural deficit, in essence, depleted all of these required reserves, such as our first one, the economic uncertainties. $9.2 million is required per the education code. It's 2% of the total general fund expenditures. That is the requirement. Just to put something in perspective, our payroll can range from $22 to $24 million a month. So that's just a portion of what is required to be set aside. So these one-time savings have allowed the district to restore that reserve. The other reserve that, again, was depleted in 17-18 and is required to be set aside because there is a debt obligation against the general fund that went into place around 2005. This particular debt obligation matures September 2021. You have to have this $5 million set aside for that purpose when it matures. So another requirement. Again, it's only one time in nature in that regard too. Once that maturity is paid for in September 2021, that component of the reserve goes away. And then these are the other required components. We've been rebuilding those over the last 2 years that are meant to be put aside as well, that are required. What you see, so again, this 19 million is allocated as such into these areas. What's truly, in essence, unassigned is about $3.7 million. What we've noted here, and I know there's been a little bit of conversation, there was a previous agenda item, what we're indicating here, because of these one-time savings, there is an opportunity to possibly revisit and look at our textbook adoption, or also explore areas such as ethnic studies, because that has come up. Because during the 2017-18 year, because of the district's financial position, the textbook adoption plan, which was in place at the time, was suspended in essence because of the district's financial position. So this gives an opportunity to revisit that and see what books can be refreshed in essence, or perhaps help support areas such as ethnic studies. So again, really truly what's left is 3.7. Okay, so that's on the unrestricted side of the general fund. The next slide goes into the restricted side of the general fund. Those areas here include funding such as our title monies, various programs and so forth. And so that's what I'd like to transition to this next one. Because as you saw on the unrestricted, our schools were also challenged because of the school closures. These particular funding sources that have is intended to be spent on a specific purpose, monies which are part of the what we call the ESSA, the early elementary secondary act, and so also our after school resources and our partnership academy grants and our career technical education grants. These various agencies, some here in this case led by the U.S. Department of Education, and then also by our state as well, waivers were put in place to say, we understand you're not going to spend all of those dollars, because as you can see, our title money, we had about $2.3 million that was unspent in 2019-20. The federal government only allows you to carry over 15%. As you can see, that's well above that. And so we can utilize this waiver, give school districts 18 months to spend those dollars as was intended. So that is issued by the federal government. Same thing again with our after school programs. One is state, one is federal. Again, we have until December, but you can see there's now different time frames as to when those dollars need to be spent. So we're very cognizant of the fact, working very closely with our state and federal office and the schools of when these due dates are coming up. And then as you can see, even with our partnership academy grants, those expired last month. The dollars had to be spent by August 31st. So again, this is just a subset of the restricted, but I wanted to point that out. That's what the next few slides are indicating, again, how these various provisions came into play at the federal level a few months ago to provide that flexibility to school districts. This next slide here is more from a disclosure standpoint. Back in 2015, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, known as GASB, required that pension obligations be recorded on the book. So we call it a book entry, where revenue is recorded and expenditure is also recorded. We are required to reflect the on-behalf pension cost or proportion of what is for Sweetwater as to what's contributed by the state. So this year is a little bit higher than last year's, is about $27 million. So this number does change annually based on what the state contributes into the program. And so we have to reflect that, and that's reflected in this ACTS report. So then transitioning to some of the other funds that are included in the report to the board. One specifically, there's various funds, but one that I want to call out and spend a little time on is our nutrition services program, our Fund 13. I shared a snapshot at the time. We had an estimate at the time for June, but during budget adoption, because of COVID and the various scenarios over the last few months, the federal government or the USDA has allowed for a waiver to be put in place that helps not only us serving our students, but also the community. And so you can see that comparing last year to this year, the amounts are significant in terms of our claim, because now our team has been serving a broader number of families and students. With that, it's also provided one-time revenues that has resulted in the fund ending very favorable compared to how it has in years past. So that aspect of it with those higher revenue claims, as you can see here, operationally, it's about $2.3 million from the bottom line standpoint. Why I have an asterisk on here was to inform the board that when we were doing our work over the summer, the waivers from the federal government had ended as of June 30th. So we were operating July and August at reduced claim capacity in essence. Very much different. Our numbers were very low compared to a year ago, just again, because of our distance learning. And so we were going to need, and still will need, this fund balance from 1920 to help carry through the summer months. What fortunately was approved just recently, about 2 weeks ago, was the federal government did extend that now starting in September, where we can utilize that starting this week, into the end of December 31st. Hopefully they extend it out for the remainder of the school year, but we wanted to ensure that we were not going to take a loss over the next few months. And so Mr. Eric Spann and his team will be working diligently to ensure that we're feeding and providing meals to our community. But we were thinking, and we will continue to monitor this as we get to first interim. In the event we'll have to reduce this fund balance because we'll deficit spend, or if we can hold it pretty stable. So I wanted to call that out because it's very unique as it relates to the current COVID and distance learning environment. The next few slides are our capital funds. Again, just for the board's reference. What I'd like to then close out with is note what I mentioned earlier. We are bringing forward the 18-19 financials. As I've said in previous meetings, there were two key factors for the auditors: was awaiting the AB 139 report, evaluating those details, and we'll touch upon a little bit here on the next agenda item, but also us as a management team working very closely with them on the balances for 17-18, the ending balances, because those became the beginning balances for 18-19. There are a lot of restatements, and you'll see in the upcoming weeks that we needed to properly note those. So that'll be coming forward. And then for 19-20, I mentioned earlier, the work had already commenced, particularly at our school sites. Again, all through remote, kind of remote setting. Our schools, there are 5 schools that were tested for school attendance and the ASB student body accounts. And then for the district-wide financial audit, we've been doing that work as well. That kind of started in August and it'll carry all the way through December. So we're finally getting back on track to a kind of a normal accounting audit reporting cycle. But there is still a bit of a little nuance here, is because, and this was implemented by the state with Governor Newsom, because audit firms and school districts, again, all be in this remote setting, we're going to need a little bit more time, because traditionally an audit report is brought forward from a statutory standpoint by December 15th. The governor has granted audit firms and LEAs through March 31st of next year. We've been working closely with our auditors, and we believe we'll be able to bring this forward for 19-20 by the January board meeting. So again, we're getting back on track. Again, obviously, again, the work environment's a little bit unique for us, but we will be ahead of this extended period here. And so with that, again, we'll be providing the unaudited actuals and all the supplemental forms that's required by the County Office of Ed upon board action, and they will receive those tomorrow. Again, they've been privy to these reports over the course of the last few weeks. We reviewed the details with them and the outcomes, so they've had that information. And so with that, we're recommending that the board approve the unaudited actuals report.
Thank you. Deanne, we have speakers on this?
There are no speakers on this item.
Do we have any questions or comments from the board? I could lead off. And you don't have to come up with this right now. Dr. Salcal, maybe in our Friday update. If you could provide the details on that, I think it was page 8. The details on the projected numbers by contract and resource and contracted services, and what was projected in the last column in the 19, or maybe it was page 6. Yeah, on the what was projected in what was projected in the last column in the 2019 and 2020 unaudited actuals. Does that make sense to you there?
The difference between 26 million and the 22 million?
Yeah. And then just what is and what I guess what I want to know is what exactly was done to come up with those numbers in the projected column and what actually occurred in the 1920 unaudited.
So we can provide the detail for that. What's unique with the 26 million is, we'll take an example of a contracted service where a requisition then turns into a purchase order will encumber for, let's say, $500,000. There's a plan to use those dollars throughout the year. So when we're building and we're getting to the budget at this point in time, we're bringing to the board what we know. We see actuals along the way, but we know, okay, there's this program or this school has submitted for a $500,000, so that those dollars are being held. It's not until we close the books, like I said, over the summer, whereas we work with the program and we work with the schools, we inquire, okay, we anticipated X, it came in at Y, what's the difference? So a lot of these contracts weren't utilized because of the last quarter of the fiscal year, but we can certainly provide that information to the board.
Yeah, I just want, the contract and the resource. That's what I was looking for, but thank you. And then the last thing I have is how do you ensure staff accrued expenses appropriately at the fiscal year end, and what is that process?
So again, it's looking at all those purchase orders. We had scenarios where our accounting team was actually calling vendors just to make sure, have we received all of the invoices, that nothing had been sent to a different department. We've been following up with the vendors. If we saw a pattern, if we looked at actuals, let's say we didn't see anything from May and June, we were calling vendors to follow up. Did we need to accrue for those costs? Were the invoices coming in later than expected? Or if not, then we know that those costs weren't coming in. So there was a lot of follow-up.
Sounds like it. Okay, thank you. Any other board members have questions or comments on this? If not, what's the recommendation on this? I have to open it up to.
It's to approve the unaudited actuals.
So do I have a motion to approve the unaudited actuals?
I'll make a motion.
Second, Solis.
Moved by Mr. Pike, seconded by Mr. Solis. Vote please.
Adamos,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Ferrantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. That was K2, K3.
Thank you, President Segura. This is an informational item that we're bringing forward to the board, and it's both Dr. Salkeld and I. And in essence, it's to provide an update of the implementation plan for responding to the FCMAT extraordinary audit. The plan was taken forward to the Audit and Finance Subcommittee recently in order to receive feedback and to have questions and to address comment, but it really is our efforts at providing a response to the observations and or recommendations that were made by FCMAT, and it's been a work in progress, but we wanted to share our update. That was our our commitment to the County Office of Education is that we would be providing updates on a regular basis to the Board of Trustees as well as to the public. And so with that, I'll ask Dr. Sockel to present the item.
So if I switch over and just to point out, as Dr. Geary mentioned, our obligation in terms of the FICMAT report was this letter that was released on July 7th to Dr. Paul Gothold that indicates what was noted and kind of our plan of action, as Dr. Geary mentioned. But most importantly then is the table that we shared during the Audit and Finance, let's go back to the top, Audit and Finance Subcommittee that was well received, and Trustee Hall as the chair, and for the community members and for our Trustee Solis who sit on that committee. We reviewed the details, specifically, looking at the details regarding the recommendations provided by FICMAT and how this table is structured, notes those recommendations as well as specific findings. Some of these areas, as noted here on the first page of this plan, note an awareness to fraud prevention, risk assessments, and so forth. And as the board's aware, on August 31st, not only did we hold the meeting with the board where we had outside counsel provided training, but during that day, we also had our fiscal services team as well as management as part of those trainings, again, to have an awareness of fraud prevention and so forth. We do have our fraud hotline in place as well as another venue to provide some reports. And so it's available to report any cases or considerations there. So again, we highlighted that piece of it. What you'll see in some of the other areas relate to our ongoing effort, which we've been connecting, I highlighted in the last presentation, with the County Office of Ed, reviewing all of the financial components, reviewing various assumptions, as you note here. We always review the LCFF calculator. We look at the cash flows. That's going to become even more important going forward with all of the state deferrals that are going to be kicking up in the early spring. And so again, having that dialogue is key. And so that's an example where we noted that it's implemented. We will continue with that practice and monitoring that activity. One other area that we've been spending quite a bit of time, and again, works well with the level of detail that we've been working with our external auditors. And an area here that our Director of Fiscal Services, as well as our management team, been working closely with staff, is establishing what is kind of in our profession key to having balance sheet accounts reconciled, looking not only at cash, but looking at our other various accounts, our asset accounts, our liability accounts, having supporting documentation for that. What is very unique, and again, what a lot of the other items noted on here relate to, is an upgrade to our computer system. An area that True Course does not have and is not as robust or it's non-existent. What many of us are very much accustomed to is having an accounts receivable module where we can run agings and kind of look at where we're at with amounts that are due to the district. Same thing on accounts payable module to kind of see what do we have due and outstanding. All of that, those systems are non-existent. That's not common in this accounting system that we have, and we're very much looking forward to that as we transition to the Infor financial module. A lot of that is maintained manually, so we've been working very closely with our team and our auditors to demonstrate these are the receivables and these are the payables. Very manual process. Again, a lot of these things weren't in place. And so, again, monitoring the cash, monitoring those, you see a lot of balance sheet reconciliation, that's what that's part of. And so a lot of these are all kind of a common theme, is ensuring that we have a solid accounting system that allows us to do the robust reporting. We're very limited on what we can do and what, again, many of the management team are accustomed to, but we are putting those things in place with the new system. We're in the process of working closely with IT, as well as our colleagues in HR, because of the position control component of getting that system up and going. But again, on a lot of things, as we've shared in that last presentation, we have put things in place, systems, and that attests to the number that you can see on those financials, creating that structure, creating the checks and balances as it relates to positions, as an example, ensuring that, you know, if the position exists, it's been budgeted, it's been vetted, it's gone through an appropriate vetting process. So then we put a lot of those things in place. A lot of monitoring, meeting with our department management, meeting with our program management, you know, having those consistent meetings. As an example, we have meetings that are coming up here in the next few weeks with our school principals on their budget. So again, having those systems in place to have that oversight, that the structure was not there. So again, a lot of it you can see in 4 again on here. We will be having, we worked through with our IT department when the implementation request for proposal went to the for bid. I'll work closely with the County Office of Ed to ensure that the specifications, so when we have the system up and going, that they will be able, the county, to receive the data file so that they have access to viewing all of the transactions, so that they can load that into the PeopleSoft system. So again, we've been vetting that process. Now, putting a new system in place, it does take time, so but we've started that process. Will we anticipate probably around 24 months or so? Certainly we're accelerating things where we can, but a lot of that will help strengthen that infrastructure for the district. And that's what a lot of these other items relate to. So again, it gave us an opportunity to share it with the Audit and Finance Subcommittee. We're now bringing it to the board, and we'll bring periodic updates on status of these items. One example relates to, again, the N4. We're planning to bring that forward in around the November timeframe in terms of where we're at with that implementation process. So that's some of the details here. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Salkel. Any questions from the board on this?
We do have one speaker that submitted comments for this item.
Sure, thank you.
These are from Kathleen Cheers. I will weigh in based on my expertise in this area, which undoubtedly far outweighs most of this board's collectively. I make that sarcastic remark based on the fact you have consistently ignored my recommendations for the following: in-depth audit scopes. Instead, you have arrogantly sat on the dais while the ill-fated deficit grew and grew under your tenure. Even with an alleged senior budget analyst as part of your team who also serves as chair of the audit subcommittee, you sat there month after month failing in your responsibilities. You were content as long as column A added to B equaled C. Then there are your choices of firms, choosing the least costly. You, with full knowledge of what the taxpaying community had been through for many years as it pertained to, amongst other issues, lack of fiscal responsibility and corruption, chose to disregard our pleas for transparency and accountability. The only auditor or audit scope with the power to blow it to hell were the Moss Adams audits. And what did you do with those results? You sat there and aligned with the very employees who are alleged to have caused this mess and an interim super who helped facilitate this mess. You had the nerve to rebut the results and the recommendations. At a past audit subcommittee meeting, a recommendation was made to hire an additional in-house auditor. Has that been brought forward and considered by the board? If not, why not? It is time for this district to get serious about audit scopes and auditing firms. In closing, I will leave with this reminder. I and others, including the Bond Oversight Committee, rallied to call for the most recent audits to have in-depth scopes and to choose a firm known who had delivered quality, Moss Adams. But in your normal manner, you chose the inexpensive firm and a weak do-nothing scope. Then, when the deficit was made public, all of a sudden Crow hit you with a change order, increasing the price for the in-depth scope needed. I am calling on the state and the county to mandate in-depth scopes for all future audits and invoke the privilege of having veto power over any poor choices you attempt to vote forward. There are no further comments on this item.
Thank you. Board, did you have any questions or comments on this item?
I would just say it was well received. It was well received by the audit subcommittee. That's my only statement. I just wanted to relay that to the board.
Thank you, Chair of the Audit Finance Subcommittee. This is just a report, so there's no action. So if there's no other comments on this, we could move to M1.
Yes, I have one speaker for M1. Comments are from Kathleen Cheers. Please explain if the $35,493 in additional charges are new outside agency mandates. We are now over $100,000 in change orders on this project. Byron Daly is a well-known contractor, and one would think they would have either considered these expenses in their bid price or taken the loss. There are no further comments.
Do we have any comments or questions from the board? On M1?
Yes,
If
President
not, I'll
Silver.
accept. Yes, sir.
Just if we could clarify what the change order was for.
I'll ask Ms. Quirk to clarify that.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Yes, actually, the majority of that, like 33,000 of that change order, is actually related to agency enforcement during the construction project itself. It had an increase to the ADA parking that was required on the lower parking lot at Olympians Track and Field, Associated Olympians Track and Field project.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. So everything that we incurred here was required by the agency overseeing it. Is that what you said, Jania?
It was, yes. And also this project is at like 99% completed at this point. So we are really on the very much on the backside of this project.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. I'll make a motion for approval.
I'll second.
Move in second. Vote, please.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Ms. Adamos had to leave.
Okay. I don't know if she's already left, but I meant to say earlier on the K2 that there was pointed out that on that page 8 line item 14, the 3.7 million that's there for unassigned reserve and textbook adoption, and I'm sure she liked hearing about the ethics studies part of that, and I'm sure we're gonna get a presentation on that pretty soon. So I meant to throw that in there before she left. But with that, we can move to M2.
Yes, I have comments from one speaker.
Please.
These are from Kathleen Cheers. I have a question regarding page 2 of 3. Did the project manager not know the requirement of a project inspector be on site? Is this a new regulation? There are no further comments.
Thank you. Janaea, could you chime in on that, please?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we do understand that project inspectors are required to be on site. This project, we started it early for a long lead item that was going to take a considerable amount of time. It took even longer. There was some submittal coordination that was a little bit in conflict and required more detail from everybody as we were going through this submittal process. But probably more importantly, with relation to this item, when we started to open up the hardscape and get underground, we had done extensive underground utility detections, planning, as-built research, etc. And there was a lot left behind from previous projects that we took the time and the effort to clean up so that anybody who comes in behind us this next time through won't have to experience what we did. And a lot of it was detailed. There was lots and lots and continues to be some hand digging that's occurring. And so it has required a much higher level of inspection with the IOR to make sure there's very specific detail and coordination happening to maintain the elements that need to remain, but also to remove abandoned systems that were not abandoned or removed in their entirety from previous projects. So this is what that is in response to and supporting that process.
Great, that's a very good answer, and I know once you get into underground, it's a very dangerous job is opening up and digging out and trenching, and it's very important for like you stated that it's cleaned up for the future, and I'm glad to hear that. That's a good job to you and the team. So
Thank
with
you.
that,
We're committed to continuing with that.
good. That makes a lot of sense. Do we have any questions from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Solis?
I'll second.
Moved by Solis, seconded by Mr. Pike. Vote, please.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
So according to my notes here, that's the last thing we have to do. And I'll say this motion is adjourned, or this meeting is adjourned at 8:08. Have a good evening, everybody, and thank you to the team and all the presentations presented. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.